Crosspoint. So glad you guys are here today. Man, I love this church, and one thing I love about this church is, man, you guys just are easily excitable. Like, I love it. You can say one thing, and we get like, whoa! And listen, I'm easily excitable, so I think it's good. Things are doing good, you know? Hey, I do lead our young adults ministry, and man, I'm so fired up about our young adults ministry, people. Like, we are launching for the very first time, like, regular first Sunday night gatherings starting October 7th. So, man, if you are 18 to 35, single or married, in school or the workforce, we would love to have you come out and be a part of that. If you're interested and just kind of be like, man, I don't even know what young adults about, maybe I want to kind of get involved, I'd love to invite you out tonight. We're having a team night right here at church, and this night we're going to just let you know about a couple ways that you can get involved with our young adults ministry, but we're really excited about that. And I love young adults ministry because, and I love working at church because I love people. Like, people like kind of fill me up. I just love being around people, and one of my favorite people to be around that I just get so much joy and excitement out of being around this person is my little brother, James. I have a picture of him right here, too. This is my little brother, James. He is 22 years old. He has Down syndrome, and he is just the funniest dude that I know. He's so smart and witty, and he's like way better with girls than I ever was. You think that's a joke? No, guys, when James was in high school, he would go to the student center before class started, and he would find the most visible post, and he would just post up right next to a leg up here, kind of like here. I imagine he has a toothpick for some reason. You know, just like, I probably shouldn't do that. He's just kind of like waiting, watching, and he's looking at all the pretty girls go by. Then he finds one that he's like, I'll follow this one. I'll do it. And he gets up and he starts walking next to him and talking to him, and he starts spitting dat game. And listen, this dude, he had like a bunch of different girlfriends. When I would come visit him at school, I would meet a girl and be like, yeah, James says he's my boyfriend. I'm like, hold on, you're like the fourth person to tell me that today. What's going on with James right now? I didn't have a girlfriend in high school. He's cool. He's a cool dude. He's like James Dean more than James Lyons. But James and I's conversations, they're always pretty entertaining. You know, when I told James, I lived in Missouri for a lot of years, and when I told James that I was moving to California, he says California like this. He calls it La Bologna. He says La Bologna. And so I'm just like, James, I'm moving to La Bologna. And the first thing he tells me is like, you got to find Drake and Josh. You got to find Drake and Josh. I think they live there now. And so I'm like, I'll do my best, bro. I haven't found him yet. So if you know of a way I could get in contact with them, you'd make a short, stocky, Down syndrome, 22-year-old very happy. But one thing I love about James, he's much like you guys. He's like very easily excitable. Like, you could tell James one thing and like that seems like kind of insignificant, like this small piece of information, and it can fill his like joy and excitement tank for days. Like James, he kind of takes the most, you know, maybe something very ordinary, and he can just turn it into a big thing. For instance, James will often come to me, and he'll see me after being gone for a little bit, and he'll be like, Bobbert! Because he calls me Bobbert, so cute. He's like, Bobbert, good news! I'm like, what's the good news, bro? He goes, I went to Walmart today. I'm like, okay, that's great. I mean, that's awesome. That's great. But my favorite thing that James says in this kind of category, he'll come to me, and he'll be like, Bobbert, good news! I'm like, what's the good news, bro? Tell me. And he says, trash day tomorrow. The dude gets pumped about trash day. Every Thursday night, he's running to each member of the household to be, hey, tomorrow's trash day. Man, he doesn't do the trash. He just pumped about the process of the trash happening. So in my family, the person we most associate as being like a messenger of good news is this short, stocky, Down syndrome person who's just easily excited and just jumps in and loves to tell people this good news that he has. You know, thousands of years ago, there is this person whose central responsibility, their job, was whenever something was profound or significant happened, they were the ones that were going to run and tell the people about it. So, for instance, you know, there was this queen, she was, you know, going to have a baby. So this person would kind of stand at the edge of the delivery room waiting to hear the announcement. he would wait for the whisper of the queen's representative in his ear, and he would sprint towards the town square, and he would declare to everyone, guys, the queen had a baby. And people would go nuts. People would go crazy. They'd be like, woo, that's awesome. Then one person would be like, was it a boy or a girl? And he'd be like, and he'd run back. He's like, it was a girl. And they would go crazy, and it was awesome. You know, another job that this person may have was, you know, when there was a battle, when the people were at war, he would stand right next to the commanding officer. And he wouldn't be fighting. He'd be kind of waiting and listening for the commanding officer to tell him the outcome of the battle. And once the commanding officer would whisper into his ear, he would sprint back home to let the people know what happened. Can you imagine being a mother of a son who is in that battle? Can you imagine being a wife of a person fighting in there, and you see this person who's either bringing good news or bad news coming from a distance, and you're eagerly awaiting what's happening? And they get there and they run to the town square, and you're waiting for it. And this messenger says, hail to the victors, we have won. And the crowd would go crazy. They would go crazy. Now in Roman culture, this person was known as an evangelion. And an evangelion simply means this. It's someone who brought good news. If you think about it today, you know, the world that we live in, there's a lot of negativity out there. Are you guys aware of this? There's so much negativity. If you turn on the news, you check Twitter, it's like everyone hates each other and we're all gonna die. You know, it's just like, what's going on? Like, you know, there's a lot of bad news. And a lot of times this news is driven by fear. You know, news outlets like to tell stories centered around gossip or celebrity failings. And what this tells me, and when I see this from culture, I look at this and I think our world is in desperate need of some good news. You know, the Apostle Paul was this amazing man. He was this missionary, like the missionary of all missionaries. You know, it was because of the Apostle Paul's work that he brought the good news of Jesus to like most of the known world back then. And man, Paul wrote most of the New Testament. And he was kind of this father figure for a lot of church leaders and churches. And he would often go visit them and counsel with them and encourage them and write letters to them. And like a lot of the New Testament books that we have are letters that Paul has written to the different churches. And, you know, there's this one man who's special to Paul. This one man named Timothy. And Timothy, man, he was like, you know, Paul's spiritual son. Like they were close. Like Paul knew him as a little boy and kind of brought him up in the faith with his mother, you know. Like he was like kind of like, you know, he helped call out like Timothy's, you know, spiritual gifts. And he became this leader of this church in Ephesus. And Paul would, you know, talk to Timothy and visit Timothy and send him letters. But there was this time, and we're going to talk about 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 5. And when Paul's writing to Timothy in 2 Timothy, he knows that this time he's writing to them is different than the other times. Because Paul at this time was in prison. And Paul had been in prison before, but the way he was in prison is what I imagine like Martha Stewart being in prison like. You know, it was in a rented house. There was like a guard on duty, you know. But this time when Paul was in prison, it was much different. Like Paul was in shackles. His arms were probably shackled. His legs were probably shackled. It was like a cold dungeon with the guard on duty. And he knew that it was only a matter of time before the Roman government and Nero would just go ahead and put him to death. And so Paul, one of the most influential church leaders of all time, who authored 13 books of the Bible, he knew that his time had come to author one more letter, one final encouragement, one final challenge to his protege, Timothy. And part of his message to Timothy that he talks about, and he says this simple phrase. He says 6 words to Timothy, and he co-opts this Roman word and uses it in this. And this is what he says. He says, Timothy, I want you to make this your job. I want you to be all about this. This is what I want you to do for the rest of your life. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 5, he says this. He says, Timothy, do the work of an evangelist. Now, immediately, some of you hear the word evangelist and you're like, okay, I'm done. Like, I'm kind of checking out here because when you think of evangelist, you think of that weird, pushy person in high school, maybe. Or maybe you think of like that person who like goes to these NFL games while you're waiting in line and stands on this box and yells at you that you're going to hell. You know, maybe you think of like really bad hair. Like maybe that's what you think of when you think of, evangelists. But today, I just want you to do me a favor. For the remainder of this message, I want you to go on a journey with me to reclaim the beauty and the innocence of this word. Because this word is our word. And this word is what the world needs right now. And if we're honest with ourselves, like we're kind of all evangelists for something. You know what I'm talking about? We like to tell people of the things that we enjoy and the things that kind of change our lives. If you see a good movie, like you're going to be in the office next day and be like, hey Jim, yeah, come here. Want to tell you, saw Mission Impossible Fallout, amazing. Tom Cruise has still got it 56. He's awesome. You're going to tell people about that. Or maybe you went to like a really awesome place to eat. You're like, hey Jim, come back one more time. Hey, also Imperial Thai. Amazing, best Thai food in Orange County. Just like, maybe, and you like to tell people about like the places you like to frequent a lot, the places you like to go. Be like, Jim, one more thing. Do you know that I do CrossFit? Are you aware that I do CrossFit? For those of you who don't know anyone who does CrossFit, it's probably a good thing. But anyway, like the CrossFit people love to tell you that they do CrossFit. I had people come to me all the time. I had a friend who was just like, hey, obviously you're not working out, so let me tell you about CrossFit. I'm like, excuse you, sir. I jogged last month. But we all have things in our lives that we're kind of evangelists of. We love to be the person to bring the good news about something to someone who hasn't heard it. And I love the way Paul tells Timothy in 2 Timothy. He says, hey, he doesn't say just, hey, be an evangelist. He doesn't say, hey, drop everyone here, drop what you're doing. Don't forget your job, enroll in seminary and become a professional evangelist. No, he doesn't say that. Paul says to Timothy, hey, do the work of an evangelist. There's a difference, And when Paul's writing to Timothy, he's also talking to us as well. And he's saying, hey, whatever you do, whatever vocation you're in, whatever gifts you feel like God's given you, whatever wiring that he's given you, you need to, during that time, also do the work of an evangelist. Do the work means to take the gospel, take the story of Jesus, and to put it into action. Not just speak about it, not just to come to church on a Sunday morning and say, yeah, and sing these great songs, and yeah, but actually take it and to put it into action. He says to Timothy, never stop doing this. Never stop putting the gospel into action. Another way that I've heard this said is, hey, you need to make good news your life's work. Make good news your life's work. So in a world full of fear and negativity, I want to be a person who my life is all about good news. I want us to return back to the primary purpose of this word evangelist, and for us to make good news our life's work. Because here's the thing about good news. Good news meets a need. And people who are really good at sharing the good news are often really good at identifying and meeting people's needs. So today, I just want to give you 3 ways that we can make good news our life's work. 3 ways that will help us identify how to do the work of an evangelist. And 3 ways to identify and help people that are in need. So when you go about your day, when you go to lunch, when you go to work, when you go to school, when you go to Walmart, when you do trash day, when you visit your parents, whatever you do, think about how you can help the needs of people around you. Think of ways to do the work of an evangelist. Think of a way to make good news your life's work. And the first way that I think we can do this is looking and meeting relational needs. You know, Jesus was so good at this. In John chapter 4, he met this woman at a well in Samaria. And this woman, you know, he's out there at noontime, and this woman comes up to get some water. And honestly, just with the way the world worked back then, women were kind of on the lower totem pole. So Jesus had every right just to not acknowledge this woman who was here. And not only was she a woman, but she was, you know, an outcast racially. You know, there was a lot of tension between the Jews and the Samaritans, so it would have been very okay for him really just not to say anything. But on top of that, this woman was like socially outcast. Like she had, you know, a ton of husbands. She's been, you know, divorced so many times. The person she's living with is not her husband. And so Jesus really had every right to just not talk to this person. But that's not what Jesus did. Jesus struck up a conversation with her. Jesus looked at her and looked her in her eyes. And in those moments when he talked to her, he showed her value. He didn't condemn her. He didn't say that she was going to hell. He showed this woman that he valued her and that she had worth. And in this simple conversation, God began to move in her life. You know, I work at church and I come into contact with people all the time like this woman. Maybe they've had a sketchy past, or maybe they've been hurt by people who say they're Christians, or, you know, maybe been burned by other people, or just experienced some intense hurt in their lives. And you know what I discovered was just a revolutionary thing when talking to these people. We just need to listen. You just need to sit down and listen to their story. Talk with them. Be interested in what's going on. Be empathetic with them and what's going on in their lives. Many times, people just want to be heard. And by you taking the time to stop and to look and to hear for someone who is hurting, they will know that in that moment, they're not alone. Have you ever had someone like really just look at you and look into your eyes and ask you how you're doing? Man, it's an amazing thing. I can tell you, man, you know, you can tell when you're trying to start a conversation with someone who's just like not into it. You know what I'm saying? Like, have you ever tried to like talk to someone? They're just like, okay, bye. It's good seeing you. Okay, bye. You know, like kind of doing one of these things. You know, like you can tell it's like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Okay, see you later. Versus the, hey, how are you? What's going on? There's a difference in that. You know, I heard a story of a pastor who brought his 2 interns to Barnes & Noble. And, you know, he was going to buy them each a book. And so they're kind of all spread out in different parts of the store. And as they kind of were out and about doing their thing, all of a sudden this pastor overheard his intern talk to someone in another aisle and say, hey, did you find everything you're looking for? Can I help you? And the pastor was a little concerned because this intern did not work at Barnes & Noble. So he like rushed over to see what was going on, and he noticed that they were in the grieving section. And this intern was talking to this woman, and this woman said, well, yeah, I'm looking for a book on grieving. And this intern said, well, why are you grieving? And she said, well, my 22-year-old son just recently passed away, and honestly, me and my husband are just kind of at a loss for what to do, so I'm here. And immediately the intern was like, oh, I'm out of my pay grade, and kind of looks over to that pastor, and the pastor kind of jumps in, and is just like, hey, I actually know of a great book that I think you would want to read. It's right over here. And he gives her the book, and in that moment, he felt like, you know, like, hey, can I pray for you? And so in the middle of this Barnes & Noble, this pastor and his intern prayed for this woman, and this woman started just to weep and to cry. And she said this phrase after the prayer was done. She said, I feel like God sees me in my pain in the middle of this Barnes & Noble. How does an encounter like that work? How does an encounter like that happen? It happens when we decide to make good news our life's work. And it happens when we start looking for other people's relational needs. When you make time to meet relational needs, people will feel seen and present by God. And the pastor asked his intern, he said, hey, what made you want to talk to this woman? And the intern was just like, I just saw that she was in the grieving section, and I just felt prompted to ask her anything. This is the first way that we can meet needs of the people around us. This is the way that we can see people where they are and the pain that they're in and just the emotional needs that they have. Because here's the deal. Everyone has a relational need. Every person who walked into church today, they may look good. They may say, I'm doing good, brother. I'm doing good. But honestly, there's something that they just need to talk about. They just need to feel heard in. So think of ways of how you can see the needs of the people around you. So we need to meet relational needs. The second thing we need to do is to meet the physical needs of the people around us. You know, another thing that Jesus was so good in his ministry is he was so good at meeting the physical needs of people. Like before he would preach to everyone, he would go around and heal people. I mean, he would feed people. And this is what Jesus' ministry was all about. Like he kind of got their attention and then preached the gospel to them. And so in Matthew 25, 35 through 40, Jesus is telling his followers this. He says this. He says, for I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me, and was in prison and you visited me. Then the righteous people will say, Lord, we didn't do any of those things. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? Or a stranger and show you hospitality? Or naked and give you some clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did this to the least of my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Man, the gospel message involves physical help. That's why as a church, we do what we can for who we can. We have an incredible compassion ministry that goes to different parts of the world, to Mexico, Guatemala, the Philippines, Africa, all over the world. And we do what we can for who we can. We partner with amazing organizations to feed people, to give people an education. You know that most hospitals were kind of invented by Christians because they served a God who met people's physical needs. And that's good news. You know, I grew up in the Philippines. My parents are missionaries. And you know, in the Philippines, it's kind of like this, it's like the 7th largest city in the world, Manila, where we lived. And traffic was, you know, horrible. If you think LA traffic's bad, try Manila traffic. And, you know, we would often get like, you know, in standstill traffic every day, all the time. And the Philippines, you know, is a third world country. There's, you know, you have like the big sky rises on one side of the road, then you have the squatters living over here in the other side of the road. And we would have people, every time there would be a standstill stop, we'd have little beggar children come up to the window and just kind of like tap on our car window asking for some things. And, you know, like you get to a point where you're just kind of like, you get used to it. Like it happens so often that it's hard to see every single time. But I remember one day my dad, you know, stopped and there was like these 3 or 4 little beggar boys and he each gave them like 5 pesos a piece. And he said, a piece. And he says, hey, if you go to this church, if you go to my church, I can feed you. I can give you some more. And so they came on a Sunday, and after the preaching happened, my dad got off stage and he saw these little boys that were there. And so, you know, the church began to feed them on a regular basis. And the church then found out that, you know, these guys just didn't have any sort of financial ability to pay for the way to go to school. And so, you know, the church and my dad started to, you know, begin to help them to go to school. And this is kind of an amazing story. One of the little kids that were there, he's not a little kid anymore. He's actually a pastor. He encountered Jesus and he's now delivering this message of hope to other people to hear about Jesus. You know, the good news is for everyone. But honestly, there's probably no way that kid would be ready to hear the message of Jesus if his stomach was growling. If he was, you know, can't focus because he was so, you know, malnourished. It was only after his physical needs were met that he was ready to hear about Jesus. And that's good news. Everywhere you go, we need to be looking for how you can help people's physical needs. We need to be looking for how to help people's emotional or relational needs. And the third thing is we need to look to help people's spiritual needs. If we're going to make the good news our life's work, we need to become normal, and we can become expert at normalizing, talking about, inviting people to, and sharing our faith. You may ask, like, man, how do I even do that? Like, I kind of get the first two, relational and physical, those make sense to me, but like spiritual, like I don't really know how to like take the dive for that one. Like, we need to be people who are just ready to pray for people. We need to be people to look for those moments in our friendships and conversations and tell people about the good news of how Jesus has changed our life. We need to be expert at hearing phrases like, man, I'm just at a loss for what to do right now. I'm just in transition. I'm hurting. I'm lacking purpose. I'm lacking fulfillment. And you need to, in those moments, maybe just stop and pray for that person. And maybe invite them to come to church with you. Maybe to have a conversation about the time where you experienced that. You experienced hopelessness and purposelessness, and say how Jesus kind of filled you in that moment. Because our whole goal with making good news our life's work is to see people come home. It's to see people find joy and happiness and purpose and fulfillment and salvation that's only found through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think all of us can agree with that. Like even if you're not like a super religious person in here today, like you can look at the first two things, you're like, okay, helping people, like I can get on board with that. I can probably do that. But so often, what it comes down to is not our conviction if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna make good news our life's work and make a difference in people's lives around us. It comes down to fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of stepping out and getting shot down. Fear of looking like a fool. Fear of not knowing what to say or how to say it. Am I the only one who's experienced that with this? You know, a few years ago, I led this young adults group in Springfield, Missouri, where I was living, and we kind of had this idea, like, okay, we believe this about, Jesus. We believe that we need to be, evangelions. We need to take the message to whoever can hear it. And so we kind of had our normal stuff, but like, hey, we should do like throw this big party and invite everyone we can to this thing. So our leadership team, like we sacrificed and we gave money, and we rented out this awesome space in downtown Springfield. And like we got lights, we got music, we got confetti machines for this New Year's Eve party. We got the song Turn Down for What playing at the stroke of midnight. Like it was amazing. Like it was the baller party you would want to go to. And we knew, like we made videos and promotional stuff and invite cards and everything and flyers, but we knew that the most effective way to get people to come to this event to strike up some conversations to eventually point them towards Jesus was a personal invite. That's always the best way to get people to come to church, to experience this thing. So, and we already kind of tapped out our friend group, like we invited all the people we knew. We're like, hey, we need to get outside of our normal circle. So we went and we just were like, what if we like showed up to the mall and like invited people at the mall? And we're like, okay, great. Like that sounds okay. But can I be honest with you for a second? Like just full transparency. I love the idea of doing this. I hated the idea of doing this personally. Like, just spoiler for you guys, like my top spiritual gifts do not include evangelism. Like I'm not naturally inclined just to do this. I get so worked up about it. Like I'm not naturally gifted in this area, even though I have a desire to see people come to find and follow Jesus. I'm always just wrapped up in fear a lot of times. And I'm so afraid that I'm about the outcome. And I was really tempted, just like, okay, all right, team, like we're gonna go. I'm busy that night, unfortunately, but you're just gonna go and you're gonna do it. It's gonna be awesome. I'm gonna be so pumped for you. I'll post about it on social media. I was also kind of hoping, like, I'm like, what if we just cancel it? We probably didn't get a lot of people to come with us to invite us. We'll probably just cancel it, But unfortunately, like 20 people came, and so we're like, oh gosh, we got to do this. And so I'm like, I realized, I can't tell people to do things that I'm not willing to do myself. And so I'm like, all right, let's go to the mall. Let's do it. I'm excited about it. All the while being pretty nervous still. And so we get to the mall. We didn't really have like a big plan. We're just like, all right, let's invite people, I guess. I don't know. But then we were like, we would get kicked out of the mall for like loitering or like, just like propagandaing, I don't know. And so I was coming up with all the things in my head of like the things that could go wrong. And so we came up with a good strategy. We were just like, we kind of split up into groups and like, hey, we're planning for this New Year's Eve party. So let's like, we got to get a New Year's Eve outfit. So we go to all the different, department stores and clothing stores and we like look for a new outfit. And the people come up to you and they ask you, hey, what are you shopping for? And we're like, perfect in. We're like, hey, we're actually shopping for a New Year's Eve party. Hey, that's happening soon. Hey, here's an invite card. You should come. You should come do it with us. It's awesome. This is a great strategy. Great strategy. Only awkward like half the time. And I remember we were just like pumped. We probably invited like 15 or so different people. And we were really excited. We were so excited about it. And then the day came and we had one person that we invited show up. It was this guy we met at Forever 21. And he said he was going on a first date. And he's like, yeah, I need to take someone. I need to like find a place to take this girl that I'm really interested in. So he brought his girlfriend. They just got married like a couple weeks ago, by the way, guys. I'm not close with them, so it's fine. But like, it's cool. It's cool. And so I look at that and I'm like, man, like 1 out of 15 showed up. Like if we're just back in school seasons here, like that's an F. Like a 1 out of 15, that's like a low F. That's like barely trying. You wrote your name on the paper F. That's about what that is. And I would look at it for like, if you look at it from like a return on investment type thing, you're just like, okay, 15 and 1. You're like, is that worth it? Like what happened here? And many people would look at that as a failure. But after processing it through with some people in our leadership team, man, we looked at that as a success. Because here's the thing, we didn't go to the mall and invite people and throw this party just for results. We threw this party and went to the mall because we serve a God who instructed us to be evangelions, to go out and take this good news to people. Go out to take this good news to unsuspecting Forever 21 workers. Tell them about a party, because it wasn't about them. It was about God. And listen, by doing this, something happened inside of all of us that participated in the event. Like something, we decided to give another part of ourselves to God. We declared to God, they're like, hey God, I don't care how awkward this is. I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and I'm going to do what you called us to do. We declared that we don't care how awkward it may be, you're the master of our lives. You're the boss, the coach, the CEO. You're the person who says, if you want us to go and reach the city with your love, we are going to do it, and we're going to even risk being awkward in front of people, risk looking like fools. Do you remember the first time you heard this good news? Do you remember how it felt to go from hopelessness to hope, from death to life, from wandering to being found? For many of us, we get so excited, at the beginning. We're so pumped, and I love this church because we have a lot of people who have recently found Jesus, and they're following him now. And man, so many people are just on fire for God. But sometimes we can get into this mode where it's like, life gets busy and we kind of lose the fire of like telling everybody we know about this thing that has so changed us. And we're like, okay, like we have the good news, so that I'm good. Okay, at least I'm good. And we go to church and we sit sometimes and we believe this good news, but we've lost this urgency. Guys, can I tell you something? God did not call us to be holders of the good news. God called us to be messengers of the good news. We are evangelions. We carry the good news to others because this news, it meets a need. It meets everybody's biggest need, more so than financial, more so than many physical needs that they have. This meets the need of everyone's eternity. A few years ago, there was a terrible earthquake in Italy. And after 17 hours after the earthquake took place, There were first responders who were urgently searching for and looking through the rubble. I want you to watch what they found.
Dai Giulia, dai Giulia. Dai Giulia. Piano piano. Attento alla destra. Passa qua, sta qua. Vai. Abbassa giù, abbassa giù. La mettiamo sopra. Dai. Sdraiamola. Dai raga, dai. Ecco. No, dai, sarà così, dai. Dai. Brava, bella ragazza.
That's the gospel. And here's why. There was a group of people that were searching and looking, and none of them said, hey, I don't have the spiritual gift of searching, so I'm just not going to do this. There was no people who were looking around and being like, you know what, I'm an introvert, so I can't do that. You know, everybody that was there, first responder or not, they were searching. They were pulling back the rubble. They were pushing over rocks, searching for people. They were searching for people who were suffocating and dying. They were searching for people whose breath is limited. And they got on their knees and they said, you know what, I'm not gonna just wait for the first responders to do it. I'm gonna do it myself. I'm gonna be listening for the cries of people in the rubble, and I'm going to search with them. And they began to hear the sound of a 10-year-old girl. And they worked together to pull the rocks away. And they pulled this little girl up. Everywhere you go, there's an opportunity for you to pick someone out of the rubble. There's an opportunity to proclaim the power and the beauty of the gospel, which is simply this, that God loved us. He loved us so that he sent his son to die on a cross for my sin, for your sin, for the sin that separates us from God. And he didn't just die, he rose again on the third day. And because of this, you have access to God. You have access to a relationship with God through Jesus. And if you've been changed by this message, can I ask you a question? How urgent are you? Bob Goff says this, hope turns to help when you're with people. Has your hope helped anyone lately? Maybe you're here today and you're really not sure where you stand with God. Can I just take this opportunity to tell you that this good news that we're talking about, it's not just for other people who believe it, it's for you. It's for you in your situation. And today could be the beginning of your story with Jesus. Today could be the day that you're brought out of the rubble. And today could be the beginning of a brand new life.